welcome to another episode of the Bring a Trailer podcast. I'm Randy Nonnenberg, the co-founder of Bring a Trailer. I'm super excited to be here today with a longtime BAT user, Scott Ailes. Scott Ailes has sold cars on Bring a Trailer. He has been on Bring a Trailer since even before he started selling cars. Scott, I think your account says 2015, but we'll talk about when you really discovered BAT. But Scott's true calling card is he's now involved with a company called Dryce, his own company that handles dry ice cleaning of the bottom side, typically all parts of the car. But what's famous is the undercarriage of cars and cleaning them via dry ice. It's something we see on BAT. People watch it for entertainment online. It's so crazy to watch the visuals that are provided. And he's right at the center of that world. Scott, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for your time. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So people ask us about this all the time. There's cars on BAT that are listed with these dry ice cleaned components. And I've struck up some conversations with you because you saw this as an interesting technology and wanted to jump into it and potentially offer it. It really was very narrowly offered, particularly in the United States, from equipment to supplies to vendors that would be willing to do it. And you're developing a network of that and making it more broadly available. And some of the cars you've listed on BAT have really been amazing recipients of this process. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what you've jumped into and what you've started?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I made yet another attempt to semi-retire. It failed miserably. And that was the spring of 2019. I had a dozen cars that I was kind of winding down. I pretty much split my career up between wholesale and retail. Did a lot of wholesale through the years and always tried to have a little higher level of presentation whenever we were selling construction equipment and cars and trucks and everything. And so I tried dry ice cleaning prior to 2019, but there were some challenges with it. But there were some new technologies that came out that kind of promoted me to give it a shot. And I thought, well, I'll just try it on my cars and I'll put them on your site and see what kind of response, if anybody has any, interest. I got like 2,200 people on my email list in the car business. And so my first few cars went live. I had like a green 79 240D. That was like the first one. And
I remember it. It was beautiful underneath.
It was like, you probably, I don't know if you know the story behind eBay, that Pierre Odemeyer that started eBay, he didn't really know if it was going to work. So the first thing he sold was a broken laser pointer for like $12 or something like that. And so when that sold for so much money that didn't even work, he was like beside himself. So it's like, I felt like that when I was cleaning that 240D, I'm like, oh my goodness, the car community is just going to go bonkers. They're going to think that this car's been like that all the time, but I'm going to post the before and after pictures so they can see that it wasn't. And I guess what I'm saying is it's been around since the 40s. The Navy is the first entity that started using dry ice blasting in 1945. Lockheed Martin got a patent in 74 and another company got a patent in 86. So it's been around a long time. I always tell people I didn't invent anything, but I'm kind of like that intermittent wiper guy from Ford. I took a bunch of stuff from different places and put them together and it works. And so there's a lot of people that paved the way in this space well before us and me. But the upshot is, I've always tried to have a higher level of presentation and authenticity in things that I was offering to sell. And I'm pretty passionate about doing that. And the dry ice cleaning affords me that benefit in spades. It's like over the top fun. And I think when I went down to buy my first piping for the compressor system, that was a disaster. I was too excited. I didn't care. The guy at the hardware store I've known for years, I used to be the mayor in the town, and he's like, "Oh, have you been? I haven't seen you in years." And he said, "What do you do? What are you up to these days?" And I started telling him about it. And it's like everybody's mesmerized by it. It's fascinating.
So why is it so fascinating, right? I watch those videos, and for those people there's probably people listening right now that have never seen these, right? So they can look up dry ice cleaning. We've reposted some of your videos. Obviously, they can go to Dryce, DRYCE is your feed on social channels and Facebook and such. But the So you do it in your own facility, but you also are training others all over the country. You're out of Florida, I believe, but they're going to be all in all corners of the country. And you put the car in a rack. They load up this, space age sort of device, which has effectively like a blast gun attached to it. And they get in their protective gear and they get in your car. And it's pretty different than the olden days of I was the like low man on the totem pole for the hot rod shop when I grew up, and I was the guy that got to take the dirty cars to the steam clean guy, like in the bad part of town, and like he would stand under those cars with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and steam clean these cars, and it was like the most toxic, like crazy, terrible. And I had to sit there, there were no phones. I just sat like on a bench and watched this old guy do this process, and I was like, why I wanted to stay in school pretty much. And it was like really crazy. But now, I mean, the videos that you're putting together, it's like space age, the way that it's cleaning stuff. And it's like come a long way since just, a steam cleaner. Describe the difference and why it has such a different impact.
Yeah, I mean, I drove a Kenworth truck when I was a teenager, 15 to 18, for my dad, and I sandblasted that truck with 3,000 pounds of sand and painted it before my senior year of high school. And I appreciated and enjoyed how well it worked, but I hated the dust and the dirt. And the problem that comes from that is the media that you use. You get the dirt off, but then you also have the media to deal with. And I think the part that people struggle with is it's too easy to associate cleaning with water because that's all we've ever known. It's like from our earliest memory, you're gonna take a bath, you're gonna use water. And so everything, we always referred to cleaning. Cleaning is nothing more than moving dirt from one place to another. I don't care what kind of cleaning it is. You're just moving dirt from one place to another. So the thing about dry ice cleaning is that there's no water involved, and that's peculiar. And there's no media that lasts because the CO2, which exists in three forms in the world, gas, liquid, and solid, the CO2 upon impact, instead of the sand that bounces off and falls to the floor, the CO2 sublimates to a gas. And so it just goes into the atmosphere where you are. Good news, bad news. Too much of that in an enclosed space is a little dangerous. So, we're very cautionary to the people that we train about that. But the beauty is that just the dirt becomes atomized. So three things happen when you shoot the CO2 or the dry ice at the car or the substrate or whatever you're shooting it at. The kinetic energy just from hitting it, a little bit of removal, the 108 degrees negative that freezes whatever you're trying to take off and causes it to shrink and lose adhesion. And then it's that sublimation. When that dry ice converts from a solid particle to a gas, it expands 800 times its original size. That's like a miniature thermal explosion on the surface. So now that coating or dirt you're trying to take off is atomized, and the voluminous air that we use, which is way misunderstood, carries it away, and you shoot it away from where you're working. Well, number one question, dry ice cleaning, where does the dirt go? Because you can't see it when you're watching the videos, the dirt just like disappears. I promise you, it does not disappear. So we have very controlled environments that we do this at the professional level. We have, boutique locations that will just do very small machines, and they'll tidy up trim areas and parts you can't get to. But the upshot is that it's a satisfying experience, because when you wash things with a pressure washer or a hose, you can't really see if they're clean because you got to wait till you dry it off. And so when you shoot dry ice and use that process, it's instantaneous knowledge of whether you've done the job or not. And if you haven't, you just do it a little more. So I think that's probably what's the most mesmerizing about it, is the fact that you can see your work real time. And gosh, if I've heard it once, I've heard 1,000 times or more. Oh, I can do the same thing with soap and water. Well, you might be able to, but you will also have quite a bit of time involved drying whatever it is you're working on. And we don't do that. We don't have to do that. It's like you miss a spot, you just squirt, oh, there, I got it. But if you pressure wash something and wipe it and wash it and dry it, and you miss a spot, geez, I I get all wet again.
Yeah, it's quite different. And describe for folks what it can be used on or where you find it most effective. I know, I mean, the stuff on bare aluminum components and 911 crankcases and stuff underneath. I mean, the underside of engines when you hit it with this, it's just so fantastic. Anybody who's wrenched on cars knows to have it perfectly clean, you got to take it all apart and put it all back together, which on some cars, you know, feels like it can take years, months, and years to do. And then you guys are under there showing just going across a panel, and it's really amazing what it provides. But that's bare aluminum, but it can do painted surfaces, right? It can do what can't it do, or what can it do?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, Randy. I mean, we always say a very simple thing. It eats foam. I mean, it literally eats foam, like it just makes it disappear. So all of those, little parts in your car that are made of foam, or hood pads, some of the hood pads are foam. You can't go near that. Like some of the air conditioner lines on the later model cars will have a foam cover on it. Can't go near that stuff. Well, I can't say there's certain kinds of, with knowledge and experience and technique, you can clean some of that, but that's probably the biggest single risk is foam products. And so, but I think the key for people to understand, you touched on it, and David Burrows is a very good friend of mine. He was involved with me early in this process. He's the guy that invented Bloomington Corvette, the Bloomington Gold Certified program. And he's a big witness mark guy. He's like, I don't want witness marks on my cars. I don't want to get a wrench on there, turn it and slip and make a gouge or a screwdriver and scrape the grease off. And then, when I want to clean it and look nice, I got all these scrape marks. So what you said is to do the same thing, you have to take it apart. Well, that's a big problem in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s cars, because a lot of the stuff is, obsolete, unobtainium. You can't buy some of the plastic parts and pieces. And if you go taking that stuff apart, A, you might not get it apart. B, it might come apart in pieces. And now what are you going to do? You can't even get that stuff anymore. So being able to clean the car intact and not take it apart and go across multiple surfaces, wiring, terminals, painted surfaces, code, to be able to do that and not harm those surfaces with the right techniques and tools is a big deal.
Yeah, so that's really different. So what is on the list? You scared me to death about foam. I'll never go near foam. I'll never think the same about foam again. But it can go across like painted wheel wells, painted underside. It can go across all types of metals, or are there metals you should stay away from?
So with knowledge and experience and technique, my favorite video is the Shelby GT500 KR that we sold with you, the black car. I have a video of me, that car is just laden with scoops and trim and, all of the cracks and crevices and places where wax and dirt hide. And it's a black car. It's like, oh, you can never really feel like you got it clean. And I got a video of me cleaning the entire exterior of that car, the Concours quality paint. That car did $260-some thousand on your site. And it was a nut and bolt restored car. And a lot of people are missing a huge runway. Like, what's one of the main things you hear from people that have pristine, low mileage, original cars or nut and bolt restored cars? Well, I don't want to drive it. Who wants to go on a rally on a car that just came out of the restoration shop? Nobody wants to, because it's going to take a week to clean it. And the most critical part is the surfaces are going to get abraded. That is probably the single thing that I don't think the car community has come to understand yet. I got this 33 Alfa Romeo that I acquired about a month ago, and it's got a number of data plates on it. It's a pretty important car. And, if you want to clean a data plate, how are you going to do it without abrading the surface? I mean, you have to touch it somehow. And we didn't have to. We cleaned that data plate, and it's perfect patina brass, not shiny, no scratches, no polish, but you can see everything perfectly. And that is a big deal. When you can clean a nut and bolt restored car without wiping it, I mean, who wouldn't want to go drive their car and know that they could just clean it with dry ice and not have to scratch all those lovely surfaces they just paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to restore? So I don't think people really understand that that is a very significant opportunity for the car community, for people to actually start enjoying their cars where they haven't been able to before.
That makes all kinds of sense. It's interesting. I mean, I think of it for really greasy, dirty undercarriage, brakes and wheel wells, like the stuff that gets your hands dirty. You just touched on like actually cleaning the exterior of a car. Now, I don't know if that's going to take off like wildfire. One thing people ask all the time is, what does this cost, right? I don't think I'm going to clean my SUV every week with dry ice, right? I don't think that's in the cards. And we need to just be honest about that. But like a person selling a car, selling a 88 Mustang, GT 5.0, nice car, 25, 30K car. I mean, is it in the cards to clean cars like that underneath to sell them on BAT? Or is this for the blue chip, $200,000 Shelbys that are the ones that where it's feasible to do an expensive or perceived expensive cleaning process? Break down that sort of cost, not your cost, but for like the consumer, if they want to go do this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's actually very critical. We struggle with that because that gets asked all the time, of course. And so we start with, look, an average undercarriage, if there is such a thing as an average car, right? Because there's not, but let's just say there is.
That's why I picked 88 Mustang. Isn't 88 Mustang an average car? Or what do you want to do? 2015 911, right? It's got 70,000 miles on it. I don't know. Like, yeah, a nice car, but a good BAT car, but not a Pebble Beach car, right?
Yeah. So here's how this works. So we always say this, very simple. The average car is a couple $1,000s to do this. We charge $250 an hour. People can get hung up on that without understanding that the ice is $50 an hour, and the technician value is between $25 and $50 an hour. We don't have low tech people running this equipment because these cars are really important, and knowing how to run them is important. But there are no two cars or owners alike, Randy. Not nowhere. And so like you get two identical cars like you just described. In every way, they were used the same and have the same everything, except one of them had an oil leak. And it could take $1,000 more to clean that car. So that's why we're really cautious about the average, presentation. But to be fair, it's really about expectations of the customer. The person that owns the car, if they want to sell it, that's a different, model. If it's like it's a 1974 Pinto that, is their first car and they're never going to sell it, but it's important to them, then that's relative too. But it's about their expectations and having them understand what we can do. Like I commonly respond to people this way. Look, you can get cars done in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. The cars that I do and that I like to do personally, I'm $4,000 to $6,000 because I'm wacky OCD, like off the charts. But you got to know that's who I am and tell me I don't want that. And so it's really, we have 30 guys now under our umbrella, and another 30 that are coming in this year. And we constantly work with them about managing expectations and understanding. Like one of our guys just did his first job, a 65 Buick Riviera. And Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, those are the video queens because they have the Cosmoline on them. And so think about this for a minute. If you have a part that's half sprayed with Cosmoline and the other half is not, the car's 30 years old. If you take the Cosmoline off, the dirt is on top of the Cosmoline. So under the Cosmoline, it's perfect. It's gorgeous. But the part that didn't have Cosmoline, you're going to have to do some handwork on that because it's still going to have a film. All right. So people get caught up in seeing the Porsche, Mercedes, BMW vehicles that were really well protected for ocean transport when they were new. And then when you clean them, they look great. Well, you take a 65 Riviera, it's got a little surface rust on the frame and the drive shaft and, et cetera, et cetera. American cars were not well coated comparatively. And so our service providers, our members, they get disappointed because they feel like they're letting the customer down. Oh, this guy sees his car, he's not going to be happy. And I'm like, I have to stop them and say, listen, if you didn't have the dry ice system, how could you make that car look better? They don't have any other opportunity or solution other than take it all apart and restore it. So that's where our cost is a tenth of what it would cost. And so sure enough, the guy comes to pick the car up and he's just bonkers. He's like overwhelmed. He's like, I can't believe it. It looks amazing, you know. And so yeah, it's understanding the customer's expectations and what they intend to do and why they're doing it. We tell our guys to focus on that the most.
That makes sense. Thanks for sharing that and that context. So again, I'm thinking of undersides of cars, but engine bay is an area. You guys would you clean an engine bay with dry ice?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of late model cars now. You open the hood, there's a impregnated on plastic parts. They have a picture of a pressure washer wand with an X over it. Because, you know, all the electronic systems. And like, I know that we had trouble. I sold Mercedes cars new in the mid 90s. And I think that new S-Class came out in 92 or 3. That car's got 11 different ECU processors. So even the cars that are now becoming collectible, those 90s cars, they have a lot of electronics in them, and you don't want to get that stuff wet. So yeah, it's fabulous for cleaning engine bays where you don't get them wet. And the rusty, you know, those manifolds like that Shelby, I did that Shelby manifold, you know, those are like gray bare metal. You know, they're not coated with anything, exhaust manifolds. Well, that car had 1,000 miles on it, 7-year-old restoration. So you can imagine the manifolds were starting to get just a little bit rusty. So less than a minute, they're back to looking like you just bolted them back on the car, and the rest of the car is not a disaster. So yeah, engine bays are huge. And we do, I would say 95% of the hood pads on later model cars. You know, I can take 100,000 mile or 300,000 mile pickup truck and make it look like it's 6 months old in 30 to 40 minutes.
That's an interesting one. How long does this sort of stuff take to do it? Obviously it varies. You can go, you know, crazy deep. Like it sounds like the Mustang probably took days and days, but is it a full day process? Is it a couple hours? How does it work?
It's typically a couple days. Yeah. Cause the only thing we will do for a full job is we'll put the car on the lift and we'll pull the wheels. And so, you know, wheels inside and out, wheel wells, underbody. We have some really interesting treatments that for exhaust systems. And we just upped that game. One of our members came up with a really interesting tool that we're probably going to keep to ourselves, but it's allowed us to really like the exhaust system is like everything else looks great, but you're like, you know, so we did figure out some things on the exhaust system. So if you kind of watch, you'll be able to tell our Drice Nation guys by their exhaust systems. It's definitely a 2-day job. My jobs usually take 4 or 5 days. I'm old. I don't work that fast anymore.
Fantastic. Well, it's really fun to talk about. I remember distinctly the Mercedes when you listed it because the comments section on BAT just kind of goes nuts, right? I don't know why we're all such a bunch of weirdos that like looking at, you know, control arms and you know, struts and springs and transmission cross members and things like that are so clean. But I remember that car, the bottom of it was maybe even better than the top. And then, yeah, the Mustang you mentioned, some other vehicles that have come through. But what I'm fascinated by also is, yeah, all the little esoteric stuff. So I was asking about engine bay because, yeah, back when we were taking those cars to the pressure wash guys, like we were paranoid it wasn't going to run afterwards, right? The car, it was like 50-50 whether the guy would hit the key and it would run. And so I was the guy that would need to get a bus ticket back to the shop if it didn't run. So it's always sort of fascinating. So there is and there isn't a moisture component to what's going on with yours, right? So if you shoot it at a electrical connection, is it conductive? Is it totally dry when that thing kicks to gas? Is there nothing? There's not even a momentary moisture component, or what is that like on? I'm thinking about electrical, but maybe you can advise and say what else would be sensitive there, but I was always scared of getting it in the distributor cap, you know?
Yeah, so this is the 6 months of trial and error, where Deborah, my wife of 41 years, finally resorted to the comments when I got home. Look, don't bring that home anymore. I don't want to hear about your troubles over at the shop. You figure it out, I don't need to hear all this. So it literally took me 6 months to figure out that there's a real big problem with the process, and that is you cannot have any moisture in your air system, your compressed air system. And so you'll watch some videos that I call them, well, I can't say what I call them. There's some videos out there that have wild white vapor clouds around the guy cleaning the cars with dry ice. And that is the antithesis of what we do. How can I see to preserve a special marking, a painted red mark on a spring if I can't see anything? Like it's just this white cloud. And so that was the frustration. It's like, what in the world,
It's very like Apollo 13 though, right? It adds the drama when they're like walking.
Yeah, it's great, but it also it absolutely is not what you want as a tech, and so I finally ran into a guy. I'm in Florida, so I ran into a guy that was a 25-year compressed air solutions expert, and his name was Dr. DuPoint. So we discovered that we had to treat this almost like a medical facility. We have to have -40 dew point dryer systems. Like you would never put a cube of, one of the ice tray cube in your refrigerator and expect to ever get ice cubes out of there. Like it's not going to freeze. It's cold, but it's not going to freeze. And so if it's 50% relative humidity where you're working or more, and you don't have a desiccant dryer with your compressed air system and the right kind of desiccant dryer, you're going to have moisture. You're going to have, it's going to rain on what you're working on. So, and you're using high volume, 120, 130 CFM, not necessarily that high pressure, 50, 60, 70 PSI, but a lot of CFM, cubic feet per minute. So yeah, if you've got a white vapor cloud and you're creating moisture on your work and you've got this compressed air system, you do have risk. So this is, it's probably, it's really important that people take the time to vet where they're going to take their car, that these people know what they're doing, and there's not that kind of view. Like if these guys have videos, if there's somebody in the shop that's got a video and you're watching the videos and that white vapor clouds everywhere, that's a problem. You can't effectively do this and do it well and protect the work that you're doing if that's happening. So if you do it right, it's dry. We now do our work inside air conditioning, with a climate control facility with a proper compressed air solution. So it's like the difference of night and day. It's like where I started when I did that green Mercedes, probably took me 3 times longer because it did get wet. It got wet because I didn't have the right setup.
Makes sense. So, I mean, that leads me to wonder, do you think there's ever a world in the future, certainly it doesn't sound like now, where it becomes more adopted by individuals, right? I mean, you say it costs, I mean, if you go nuts on your own cars and are obsessive about them, you can spend 5 or 6 grand doing this process, right? I mean, a few of those on a broader fleet, and you can start trying to do the math and trying to take matters into your own hands. I tend to draw a line on how far I'll go. I know Eastwood will send me, everything to powder coat and cook my own parts and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Some things are left to other facilities, not at a residential address. And I need to stay way away from that. My dad and I actually had a compressor and painted some panels for my Land Cruiser in our garage, which made our garage, green until it was knocked down and renovated for 20 years later, and people do that, people kind of take matters into their own hands, want to do stuff. And some of that is positive, right? I mean, so many of these detailing companies are selling pressure washers and foam guns and all this stuff that, we had buckets and sponges back in the day. So things will advance. Do you ever foresee, given how controlled there's sort of science in this, I certainly think for the near term, and not to mention the material, I'd love for you to talk about the material that needs to be delivered to you and maintained. I mean, there are aspects of this that are definitely not for the hobbyist. Can you talk about where you see it going, and a little bit more about the current state of the infrastructure there?
Absolutely, yeah. So the equipment side of it is definitely a big part of it. But I share often, if I gave you a dry ice machine, the very best, it will not even remotely ensure success for you, because you have to set up the environment, you have to set up the proper air system. And so all of those parts and pieces have been going up in value because of the unfortunate circumstance in our world right now with inflation. So compressors, lifts, all of the things that support the dry ice machine are increasing in value. The dry ice machines will absolutely get cheaper, no question about it. Where the range is like from 60,000 and down, right? We sell one for $10,000. That's a hobbyist version, like what you're saying. And the answer to your question is, yeah, there are people that have bought that $10,000 machine and they have a 10-horse compressor and they're tinkering around in their shop and they're kind of getting away with it and dipping their toe in the water. And it really works well for, like, you go out for cars and coffee, you come back and you got brake dust on your wheels. Well, boom, you just, you go around the car, and it's certainly a toy. While it's an instrument, it's also a toy. But where it's going is there will be a manufacturer one day that they'll decide to create an assembly line, because the demand for the machines will be there to justify an assembly line. Because let's face it, when you look at these machines that are $60,000, come on, we know that if you could build 10,000 of those machines, it probably cost $3,000. Look at a car that costs $60,000 and how complex it is. These machines are not that complex, but they have to be made by hand right now because the demand isn't there. So yes, we do have what I would call a starter machine that people can get an idea and a concept of what it's all about. But as the machines come down in value with manufacturing benefits and demand, it's still not going to offset the overall cost for a full-fledged operation. It's like saying, okay, I can buy paint guns cheap now, so it's now I can do a paint job for half price. Well, that doesn't work. And then the supply side of the material is pretty challenging. So we basically started this support system and network for our guys in the middle of COVID, and we all know the vaccines were shipped largely in dry ice. And so I'm just over at my shop, I'm cleaning my cars, doing my thing, minding my own business, and everything's fine, except for all of a sudden I can't get dry ice. Well, probably wouldn't be a good idea for me to complain about, I should clean my cars before someone would get a vaccine. So we just had to suck it up and let that happen. But I will tell you that the misconception is, in some cases, where does this CO2 come from? It comes from fuel plants, largely. There's one place that CO2 comes out of the ground. I think it's in Alabama. It just comes out of the ground. But everywhere else, we're capturing CO2 as a byproduct of a fuel plant. And so basically, right before that CO2 goes into the atmosphere, the companies capture it, we use it, and then we release it. So it's just like a little bit of, it takes a left turn and goes to the dry shop, and then it ends up where it was headed to already. And for those people that will go a little off the rails with us, if you have soda or beer in your local area where you live, you have CO2. I mean, it's the same stuff.
You're talking about the environmental concerns of CO2. Is that where people have some frustration?
They think we're creating it.
I see.
Yeah, and we're not. And we are absolutely not carbon neutral. I went there once in a video. Oh my gosh. I mean, and I'm very cognizant of that whole situation. I will never use that term again, because if someone wants to drill down far enough in it, you can never be carbon neutral. So bottom line is we're using a CO2 byproduct, and we're saving the water systems in our communities. There's no chemicals and water going down the drain, nothing going to the sewage treatment plant. I promise you, a lot of these elected officials, if they knew that we could execute this job and not put these harmful chemicals in their sewer systems, and not use, I haven't put water in a car in my shop for 3 years, man. I don't have a garden hose at my shop. And I agree with you 100%. I don't think we'll ever see a day where you go to a car wash and it's dry ice, like the common everyday car. I don't think that's, but for me, it's just a passion thing. Like when I clean a car, I don't tape it off and protect the top side, because when I'm done, I just clean the top side with the dry ice. Why? Because it's not abrasive. Doesn't scratch the car, even a Concours finished car.
Amazing. You remember the brand Gunk, Gunk? You ever use that stuff?
I can smell it. I can smell it. I grew up on a farm and trucking business. Are you kidding me? That stuff is nasty.
I think they sponsored NASCAR and stuff too, but man, I had that stuff on the shelf. That's what you'd spray on the bottom of a crankcase, man. I mean, that's how you did it. And it'd leave a residue. And it was like, it would take
like
you.
Rinsed it. It was like this weird oily white stuff, it's like nasty.
Speaking of what you're washing down the drain, man, pouring that stuff would get rinsed straight into the gutter, right? I mean, just so terrible. And the sort of space age comparison of what you guys are doing compared to that, and then you get like a plastic bristle brush. There you go. That's your afternoon. I mean, man, we have come a long way just inhaling the fumes off some of those cleaners from back in the day.
Listen, the truck I drove was a Kenworth conventional with a sleeper, and I drove. The trailer was a low boy. So
by the way, I want to call out. You said you're driving that when you were 15, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic.
I got pulled over in Illinois all I had was a school permit, right? And I started driving. I had a 71 Mach 1. It was my first car. And I was driving it to school when I was 14. And so I'm driving this truck in Illinois across the river. And this guy pulls me over for speeding. And he looks at he's give me your license, your registration, logbook, blah, blah, blah. And I had all that stuff. Like I was a real truck driver, right? I had a logbook and all that. He looks at my license and he's like, son, this is a school permit. You got anything else? I said, no. He just hands me all the stuff. And that's back in the day where you would sit in the front seat with the policeman. You didn't have to.
I was never around for that, man. I've thankfully I've never been asked to sit in the back seat either, but I have not experienced the front seat of a cop car.
And I also did that. The first car I ever sold at auction was a 75 European Pantera. And it was 1987, I think. And
not on BAT though, right?
No, I would have if it was there.
Oh, you said in 1987. Yeah. Okay. So can you share the venue? Where'd you sell it at auction?
Well, so that's the story. So my best friend in high school, his best man at my wedding, had never ridden in the car. And I was selling it the next day in Rockford, Illinois. Lou Lazarus April in Rockford. That was the name of it. It was before Dana Meekum's sale. I was at Dana's first sale in 88.
Love it.
So I get pulled over at 135. Well, I didn't get pulled over. I passed the trooper on the side of the road writing a ticket to someone else at 135 because it was dark. And so I just pulled over. I just slowed down and pulled over. And it's like it took him 2 minutes to get caught up to me, And I was just leaning on the back of the car, and he got out and he goes, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "Well, I just shifted into fourth and I still had gear after that." So I had full intentions of going a lot faster. And so he gave me a warning ticket. He said, "Just make sure and sell that car tomorrow." And I did. And I will tell you, for all you live auction guys, what a lesson that was, that moment, that day. I was in my 20s, early 20s. And I wanted 22 grand for that car, right? It was one of two cars with a factory sunroof, like a drop-in factory sunroof with a Australian 351 Cleveland. And it's a 20 grand, and the ringman's pushing me like, lift the reserve, the bids will take off as soon as you do it. And Randy, I'm not kidding you. The second that my mouth started to move to say, okay, the guy dropped the hammer, said, "Sold, next car." I thought, oh, okay. I see.
That's how it works. That's how it works. They'd done that rodeo before. You were not their first.
That was a rough lesson, but it nonetheless was a very good lesson. But I do want to tell you something about a comment that I make to people all the time about Bring a Trailer. And it doesn't happen very often anymore, but in the early days, if I brought up Bring a Trailer and somebody looked at me odd and they had their spouse with them, I would apologize to their spouse first. I'd say, "I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to share something with your partner or your husband. And then afterwards I'd see them later and they'd be like, oh my gosh. And that's the problem, that anybody listening to this that has never watched a dry ice video, I'm apologizing to their partner or spouse, because they're going to get lost in dry ice videos online.
I love that. That's fantastic. Let's talk about your car. You got a car live on BAT right now, and there's some funny kerfuffle going on in the comments because you didn't dry ice it. And now we may get to hear the rest of the story on that one. So first of all, it's a super, super cool car, Nissan Skyline, early four-door Nissan Skyline GTR, real GTR with a twin cam in it. And yeah, tell us what's going on with that car and its undercarriage.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. One of my best friends in town here introduced me to the surgeon in Gainesville that had that car. It's his car, and I'm selling it on his behalf. He unfortunately contracted long haul COVID from a patient, and I wasn't that familiar with long haul COVID, but the problem is that he has very low muscular stamina, and he can't drive manual steering, manual transmission cars very well. And so we've got that car and the uber rare, coming soon to your place, 59 Patrol, of which there's 5 known to exist. So Nissan Patrol from 1959. So those 2 vehicles are up. And the reason that we didn't, I'm pretty particular about my relationships with my clients, and he was a new client. I just didn't want him, I didn't want to force it on him. And the car does have a lot of neat patina. I'm a big preservation and patina guy. The Alfa, we're not going to restore the Alfa Romeo. It's been in storage 57 years, and we're not going to restore this Nissan first generation Skyline. But I will admit, I remember consciously deciding the day I shot the video if I should put a different shirt on. And I thought, nah, I like wearing these shirts. I'm going to wear it. And if someone gives me grief about it for not having dry ice clean this car, then I'll address it. Maybe I'll just dry ice clean it. And so I didn't want to force it on the doctor, because it's expensive in some respects. And I didn't want him to think, oh, geez, what's this guy, pushing me to do this? I think it's very valuable. I think it's really helpful for people. I mean, you wouldn't present your car on BAT without cleaning the top. And you wouldn't, run your 4x4 truck through a mud hole and then take pictures of it and sell it and bring a trailer. And so that's kind of the way that I analogize it is, I put it on there as a bit of a ploy to see if anybody would harangue me for it. And it only took 2 days. so
Yep.
said, I don't get it. You got a dry shirt on and the car's not dry ice clean. So we're going to put that car in the lift first thing in the morning, and we're going to shoot some videos of what we do. There's certainly plenty of before pictures right now that people can look at, and we're going to be very careful about the pictures we take so they're the same vantage point, so you can oh my gosh, look at side by side, there it is. And it's going to be cool because that car, you have to really be careful, as you well know, and have done a great job with your explanations of what cars are. Yeah, okay, well, how do you quantify rust in a description? It's really tough. And so we always go overboard in authenticity and presentation. It's what's given us an advantage in our efforts for over 40 years. But in this case, if you can't really tell how little rust, surface rust really is all this car has, you're going to be able to see it when we clean this car, because it's crazy. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people to see what's possible. And then I'm a big proponent of before and after pictures, because what I don't want to do is hide oil leaks and issues, by cleaning something. So we are very, very strong in our group that we like to provide before and after pictures, so people understand both sides of it. You get to see how clean it is and what's underneath the dirt, but you also get to see if the car did have some issues on the oil leak side, because not many cars don't have that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Old Datsun Nissan product from the 60s and 70s. I think that would be understood, but great to see before and after photos, right? We, as you know, love, huge galleries and as much detail, and just elevating the amount of information that people can have before they bid so they can be informed. I think your presentations do that really well on BAT. And then, but people at the end of the day would love to see the after, right? There's a lot of cars that are listed with what you would consider just the before shots. Most of my cars, my personal cars, look like the before Scott Ailes. I don't have a lot of perfectly clean and dry cars underneath, and they could certainly use it. So anyhow, what a fascinating new technology.
That car, I mean, I'm a JDM converted person. I'm shocked. I had no idea that there was a four-door car that had a 7,500 RPM red line, and how fun that car is to drive. If you haven't watched the video, listen to the video. Forget about watching it.
Yeah, they sound so good.
It's so fun, and I'm just shocked that here I am, this car guy. I mean, I used to trade 40, 50 cars a month wholesale, and I've always been a collector car guy, and I had no clue. I didn't know that car existed, and I made a comment in the many people I've said, as of recent, I think every single car I've ever bought and sold in my life is worth more than I sold it for. I mean, everything. And, as more people like me come to understand what those cars are, everybody knows the late model Skylines, most people do, but I didn't understand that early history. I sold Datsuns in 85 new in Davenport, Iowa, Prescon Motors. Didn't even know that. I thought it was Datsun worldwide. I thought when we started selling the 85.5 Nissan hardbody that, they changed their name to Nissan. Well, my understanding is that they gave us Datsun because they didn't know if we'd accept the brand, and they didn't want to ruin or tarnish Nissan. So I just found out in the last 6 months that Nissan, was Nissan in the 60s in Japan.
It's a fascinating story. And the four doors are very interesting, right? The Hakko cars, we've sold a good number of the two-door cars, a bunch of them replicas, some real GTRs we've been lucky to have. Yours as a four-door obviously is even next level unusual.
It is.
And really neat to see. So we're psyched that it's on BAT. It'll be live. We're going to get this. It's live right now. We're going to get this podcast out. It'll still be live for folks. They can surf over to BAT and look at the underside. And by then you may even have some interesting videos you're linking to and posting about the dry ice process. If people want to see this or learn about what you guys are doing, or find how they can find someone to do this in their area, people listening right now are from all over the country and all over the world, really. But I know your focus is on the American market. Where can they find it? And do they find a local vendor, or do they find you and you link them up, or how does it work?
We actually have a site called Dryce Nation, DRYCE, Dryce Nation. And you can go to the site, and the most prominent thing on the site when you scroll down is the map. And we're adding new locations regularly. And so we have a really interesting group of people. And I will tell you, it's the most, we've been training these guys and bringing them along for 3 years, but the majority of them for the last year. And they're spread out all over. And there's a lot of markets where we're underserved, and we want to help them. But I would say the most important thing is when you're looking for someone, Google's your friend, of course, but you really got to be careful. Don't be afraid to call someone that's not like, if you're in a space where we don't have a supplier or a provider, call us anyway, and we'll kind of guide you on what you should watch and look for to make sure that someone is going to treat your car well and do a nice job. We're very much proponents of the entire process, and it is somewhat sad. I'm 60 years old this July, and everybody says, well, how come I haven't heard of this before? It is kind of a bummer. It's been around for so long, and it's taken this long to get here, but embrace it now, because it's for every person that says, nah, I don't really think so, once they see it or they have their car done. Like, I can't tell you the amount of customers that we have, they'll give us a budget. Like, I don't spend like $1,500. And so I like to tease them, I'll send them pictures, and I'll start in the middle. Like I'll go down the middle of the car, and when I blow up their budget, and I'm working my way out, and I stop and I take pictures and videos of where I went and where I haven't been able to go yet. And I say, so you really want me to stop? No, keep going. One guy says, send me some more videos. It's better than Game of Thrones. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, so they can go to your website, Dryce Nation. And there's also local vendors. And I mean, you're not the only guy doing this in the US.
No.
We talked about that, but we
Worldwide.
do like you're a known source, you're a known seller on BAT and have sold some really cool stuff on BAT. So I'd be looking to you for this. And I told you, we've talked before about my 80s cars, my 535 IS BMW, man, it could benefit from this like crazy.
I told you that I cut a deal with Reliable, and you can bring that thing all the way out here. I got somebody in California. We'll get you. We got to get
find some way. I got to experience this firsthand, some way.
We got to get you clean.
Anyhow, but yeah, so many cars could use it, and it's so cool when I just really think it's a meaningful calling card when you're selling a car on BAT to be able to say the bottom has been dry ice blasted, and not just done but properly done. Like it's really impressive, and it's one of those things like good details and good photos, it tends to pay for itself, it seems like.
What people want to know when they're buying something is what's wrong with it.
Yeah,
that's really all they want to know. What's wrong with it? And if you can see it better,
Yeah, good point. So, okay, well, fantastic. I think we covered a lot of ground there. Super fun to talk about that topic and your car that's listed live, the GTR, which people should go check out. And I think we'll check in periodically, Scott. Frankly, obviously, we see you on the site, Scott_Ailes. And we are always curious about dry ice activities. And who knows, maybe we can do a video or something ourselves if we do one of the BAT cars. And do some more. But it's a fascinating technology, something that people should certainly be aware of. And frankly, there's a lot of mystery around it. That's why I'm glad we're doing this podcast, because I think a lot of people either think it'll hurt the car, or it's too expensive, or it's toxic, or like, how does this work, or is it going to hurt me in some way, harm me if I touch it with my fingers? I mean, there's all sorts of sort of uninformed mystique around it, much of it coming from me. Like I have a bunch of questions, and we were able to knock out a bunch of the big ones today. So definitely appreciate your openness and your willingness to share about it. Any closing remarks or anything else we left out?
Yeah, just that with all sincerity and diplomacy, there are noted huge YouTube automotive people with massive followers that I would like to help them understand what this process really is, because they don't understand. And just because you say it on the internet doesn't make it so. And so unfortunately, a lot of people are mistakenly or they're misguided. And so I really appreciate the opportunity, very much appreciate the opportunity. You've been very supportive since 2019 when I started, and we're grateful for that, because I personally have never experienced anything that's enabled me to do what I wanted to do so well. And that truck I drove had 300-gallon aluminum tanks and aluminum wheels, and I painted it, and I probably don't have a rotator cuff on my left and my right. Polish than I've done in my life. But it's just, our number one thing is we say, if you can see the dirt, we can clean it. And that's something that I've never been able to do before.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, super cool tech. Great perspective from you. Good luck with the sale of the Nissan.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. And we will catch you next time on the BAT podcast. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned for more podcasts coming up. We've got some fun guests coming up in future days and weeks here. So stay tuned. We appreciate you subscribing. Take care.